Lighting is the main element that turns images into masterpieces. The same lighting techniques that were created centuries ago by immortal artists are still the foundation of quality lighting for modern artists, photographers, and cinematographers. These are the techniques we use every day, although many in our profession have no idea where these lighting techniques came from. We'll discover later in this segment where, when, how, and most importantly why the lighting techniques that most of us use every day were created and by whom. Before anyone discards the importance of good lighting skills, keep in mind that those who work hard to gain those skills earn substantially more than those who don't. This is a proven fact. One of Nino's methods for expanding and refining his lighting skill is by simply watching classic movies. Not the movie itself, but the images. When Nino finds a well-lit scene, freezes the frame, and spends hours studying how it was lit. The next step is trying to adapt the light he saw on a motion picture to his daily work. Let's see how this lighting technique works. This is a scene lit with a single light source placed at the camera's position. Think of it as the onboard light on a camera or a key light placed too close to the camera lens. The light is flat. The object appears like a circle. It has no spherical roundness or depth. The moment we bring the light around, like we would on a key light, we start creating modeling. Now the plane circle suddenly starts showing its roundness. Of course, everything else is dark, and we are still showing only a single plane in the image. Let's place one single light on the background, but instead of illuminating the entire background, we'll concentrate the light only behind the dark areas of the object. Now, suddenly we have dimensional depth, as the object and the background are separated by light and dark areas. This is the very basic principle of the chiaroscuro technique. Let's take it one step further. Let's place more objects in the image using the same lighting technique. Now, the light and dark technique is clearly showing the dimensional depth. As we can see, the light placement is distinctively separating each plane in the image, as well as showing the roundness of each object. Now, let's use some lighting and other techniques to concentrate the viewer's attention on one portion of the image. We can accomplish this by lowering the light intensity on everything that is not of primary importance. This will make the main point of interest stand out from the rest. We can also accomplish the same result by using selective focusing, so only what's important will be in sharp focus. Just look at the comparison. The very same image, but with and without the chiaroscuro lighting technique. Can you imagine what this technique can do to our works? Now, let's see how we can apply the chiaroscuro principles to our daily work. The first rule of quality lighting is to throw away every lighting diagram. You will not learn anything by looking at a bunch of X's on a piece of paper showing where you should place the light stand. The only way to learn about quality lighting is by seeing what the light does on the subject and the shadow it casts. Let's start with the fundamentals of creating quality interviews. The first thing we do, even before we start loading in equipment, is to ask the producer if there are any specific requirements for this interview. Often, the interview is part of a feature or documentary and must match other interviews done elsewhere. This particular video was done across the country, yet from the look, it could very well have been done at the same location by the same crew. Sometimes it's more time-consuming to match a set done by someone else than starting one from scratch. The first and most important question to ask is if there's a subject placement requirement. Is the subject on the right looking left, or vice versa, left looking right? This will dictate the light's placement. If the subject is on camera left, looking right, then the proper order would be the reporter just right of the camera, key light on the right of the reporter, and fill light just left of the camera. For subject on the right of the frame looking left, then reverse everything like looking into a mirror. We don't want to go into the basic rules of composition as everyone should already know them. But remember the rule of third when composing interviews. Place the subject on the 1/3 side of the image looking into the other 2/3. Also, you are always told to use a low-back, non-swiveling chair for interviews, and this should be the main rule. However, there are times when we have to do it differently in order for the interview to blend with the story. Remember that the most important part of the images are the eyes and mouth of the person being interviewed. This is what we instinctively look at when someone is talking to us. There's something called visual psychology, and one of the rules is that our eyes are always attracted to the lightest part of an image. This is why the lightest part of our image should be the front of the face. Understandably, in television, because of editorial requirements, this is not always possible, but at least it should be one of our priorities when creating quality interviews. There also seems to be some confusion about the correct camera height. Unless we're trying to create a special effect, the lens should be at eye level of the subject, then tilted down to frame and compose the image. The unwritten rule is that if you see the inside of the nostrils, you're too low. If you don't see the nostrils at all, you're too high. Let's start with the 4 fundamental positions of the lights we use for interviews. The 4 lights are the key light, the fill light, the hair light, the side light. The side light is frequently referred to as edge or kick or grease light. For some strange reason over the years, some very colorful names have been given to this light. For simplification, we'll refer to this light as the side light. The key light. There are 3 fundamental key light placements we use for interviews: the 45 degrees or Rembrandt light, the front or butterfly light, and the 90 degrees or split light. Let's start with the 45 degrees or Rembrandt light as the artist's wide use of this technique. The light is placed at approximately 45 degrees on the far side of the camera from the direction that the subject is looking to, not 45 degrees in reference to the camera position. Your indicator, if the light is placed correctly, is a small triangle of light that will appear under the eye on the shadow side of the face opposite of the key light. The next popular key light position is what's called the butterfly light, or better, front light. The light is placed directly in front of the direction of where the subject is looking to. If placed correctly, although keep in mind that this is television and not a still portrait, and the subject is constantly moving, the shadow of the nose should be directly below and about halfway between the nose and upper lip. The shape formed by the shadow will look like wings, and this is why this is called butterfly light. The last of the popular key light positions is the split light or 90 degrees light. Here, the light is placed on the far side of the subject, and basically it should illuminate only half of the face. Because this light position can be lowered to the subject head level with minimal or no effect on the shadow side of the face, it is very beneficial when interviewing athletes who insist on wearing hats, mainly because of sponsoring commitments. Placing the light in any other position will cast a shadow from the hat visor into the eyes. Next is the fill light. Like the name says, the fill light is there to fill the shadow created by the key light. The type of light used as a fill is not as critical as the key light, but it should also be a soft light. Most importantly is that both the key and the fill lights should be of the same type and from the same manufacturer in order to avoid possible color variations on the subject's face. Unless there are reasons for the fill light to be moved, such as reflections on the subject's glasses, the correct position of the fill light should be as close to the axis to the camera lens as possible and on the opposite side of the key light. If we move the fill light too far off the lens axis, we basically end up with a secondary key light that might create unwanted shadows from the opposite direction of the key light. The fill light's main purpose is to control the shadow created by the key light, better known as light ratio. We can make it as dark and dramatical or as flat as we need by just adjusting the dimmer on the fill light. Many people prefer using a reflector on the shadow side of the key light as a fill source. Nino does not recommend this, and you can see why. In order to work, the reflector must be placed on the opposite side of the key light, meaning that even a large reflector will illuminate only the side and not the front of the face. As you can see, we have what's called dead eyes, as there is no light being reflected in the eyes, and this makes a major difference in the quality of any interview. Any kind of age line will stand out, and this would be particularly unacceptable with older people. The reflector is also casting a shadow of the hair on the dark side of the face, and you can hardly see the jewelry that the subject is wearing. For quality interviews, using a reflector for fill is not the correct way to do it. The last two subjects' lights are the hair and side light. Nino also uses larger lights as hair and side lights for the same reason that he prefers to use larger and softer key lights, because they give a softer wraparound on the subject. There are new lights being introduced almost daily, so by the time you see this video, who knows what Nino will use as his favorite lights. The main purpose of these two lights is to give added separation of the subject from the background while creating dimensional depth. This is particularly important when the subject has dark hair or dark clothes against a dark background. It also creates an additional plane of light and dark sequence. If done correctly, it gives the image additional dimensional depth. Of course, if you have a subject with little or no hair, then you don't need a hair light. Actually, you don't want a hair light, as all it does is create an unflattering shine on the subject's head. But we still need the light on the shoulders to maintain separation. The best way to eliminate the reflection is to attach a piece of black foil to the barn doors of the hair light, then shape the foil to direct the light away from the head and only into the shoulders. And just like that, the shine is gone. The hair light must be mounted on a boom to do the job it was intended to do. Using a tall stand on the side of the subject is not a true hair light. Many people do this, but here we're talking about quality interviews. If you don't have yet a one-piece convertible light stand boom combination, get one. They work great for most assignments, cost less than a separate stand and boom, and is one less thing that you have to bring on location with you. The hair light should be placed about 3 feet above and 3 or 4 feet behind the subject. Tilt it down to make sure the light doesn't flare into the camera lens. The last of the subject's lights is the side light. The side light should be placed on the opposite side of the key light and about 5 feet behind the subject. It should be as close behind the subject as possible without affecting the image or flaring into the lens. This should create only an edge of light. This is what we should be looking for. Many times we end up lighting the back side of the head because this is what the producer or director likes. Good barn doors on the light are highly recommended. And this is progressively what all 4 lights look like on the subject. This completes the light placement segment of this video.